I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr show, where it's all about the W. The Olympics are done. The WNBA season is about to start back up. But before your regular scheduled programming, it's time to make WNBA history with the first ever Commissioner's Cup. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content on winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. And remember, downloading the episode makes our stats look better, allows us to continue doing this important work. Joined today by a staff writer with us, staff writer in multiple other areas covering the WNBA, Mitchell Hansen. Mitchell, how you doing? Great to have you on the show again.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Moved this weekend. Obviously, I dictate all aspects of my life around the WNBA schedule. Moved during the Olympic break. And of course, my wife's family does not operate on the WNBA schedule. So when the games start back up, I will be in a beach town in North Carolina watching the WNBA games on the beach with my wife's family. So that'll be fun.
Nice. Very nice. With the new space, do you have like a couple TVs set up somewhere? Do you get kind of like a man cave of some sort that a lot of people have? Do you have a cool setup at all, I guess?
I got the W cave,
Okay.
and as people will see as we do, we will be recording a few more Winsidr film rooms and a few other video content that you will see. I have a pretty sweet WNBA merch wall behind me.
Okay.
I'm pretty proud of it. I got some Charlotte Sting stuff. I got some old school Mystics, some new school Mystics, some Comets, a little bit of everything. I try and collect. My dream is always to have, like, if I'm ever doing anything, if I'm getting featured on anything, streamed on anything, whatever it is, if there's a video of me, I want the background to just be like ridiculous amounts of WNBA merch, because that's how it should be. We should be celebrating these people.
Absolutely.
But not all of us have 3 monitors like you. But let's get into the crux of this, the Commissioner's Cup, which is, there's so many elements that we could tackle. And I specifically wanted to have you on because you've been doing a great job kind of leading the charge with our written staff at Winsidr covering the Commissioner's Cup. So I thought it'd be a great chance for us to kind of discuss it. But, underrated, before we even get into the aspect of the cup, an element of the cup is you're playing an extra game. And before we look at, these teams, which we will do, I'm curious for you, there's obviously many different opinions on this, but looking at this and going, okay, the Seattle Storm, obviously had a nice amount of players on Team USA and some other teams also. But, the Storm had players playing in the Olympics. The Sun had some people. Did they actually have anybody in the Olympics? I'm blanking right now. I don't think they
I'm
did, which,
blanking as well. I don't
might
think
be a
so.
benefit. But, at the end of the day, they get an extra game and they get that one more, live practice, if you want to call it that, because we don't know how serious, we don't know if this is going to be taken like a all-star game where players, aren't playing defense. We don't know if it's going to be taken as serious as a playoff game. But what we do know is these teams are getting an extra game to prepare for the last push of the regular season. How do you think that impacts the outlook for both of these teams?
I think, kind of looking at how this game will take place, I think that's where the obviously the prize money comes into, a big factor, plays a big a factor in all of this, because you are going to get, if you win the game, you're going to get 20 grand more than, if you did lose the game. If you get MVP, you get an additional $5,000. So there is still a decent amount at stake, which I think will mean that it will be more of a competitive game than an all-star game. With that said, it'd be interesting to see how the game takes place, and like, when I say that, I mean, as far as what the league is going to do surrounding the game. Is it going to be kind of like a single elimination playoff game? Is it going to be, kind of like a WNBA finals feel, just in a single game format? Is it going to be more of a kind of a celebrated event or celebrated, kind of, it's not a weekend. Well, it's not an entire weekend or an entire day like say the All-Star game is, but is it going to be something similar to that? So that it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, and what it not only is this year, but what it will turn into throughout the years. And then you look at the game itself, and the for each of these teams, or for both these teams, it'll be good that, I mean, they've already played twice this year, but it'll be good to get another sample or another game under their belt against each other, because they very well could see each other late in the postseason. So there's a lot that kind of goes into it, but it'll be unique in the way that it is. It is something that we haven't seen before, and it's the first ever anything. It's first ever Commissioner's Cup, but it's first ever, whenever there's something that's happening for the first time, it's going to be intriguing to see how it plays out. So that'll definitely be the case to kind of kick off the second half of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. The whole aspect of how will the league present this? What is it going to be like? Is an underrated aspect. Personally, I am not a fan of the Commissioner's Cup being in the middle of the week, or the All-Star game being in the middle of the week. I think both of them should be, on a Sunday or a Saturday, like a weekend thing, so you can make more of an event of it. One of the highlights for media members, fans, and players is at those events, seeing the wide variety of WNBA fans, seeing people from other teams, media members. Obviously with COVID, it's completely different. And I know that the league is taking every precaution, regarding us media members and whether or not we're allowed to go to the games. And if we go to the games, can we interview in person and this, and that? So it's going to be interesting. I mean, that's just my preference when it comes to that. But you spoke on this too. Like, they've played twice already. The Storm won both of them. So I kind of view this as one of those games where going into the game, one of the teams is going to probably inherently take it more seriously. And I think maybe that's the Connecticut Sun, right? Like, I just have this feeling, because the Sun are the type of people who really like to create that MO, get that pinboard material, get that motivation. Obviously there's the disrespect thing that they have been touting for years. But losing the first two games, I've seen a lot of, quotes coming from the Sun side of things, where it's like, well, we weren't full force then. We're a different team. We want to show. And I also happen to know that the Connecticut Sun felt pretty confidently last year in the bubble, losing Game 5 of against the Aces to go to the WNBA Finals, that they were the team that could have given the Storm the biggest run for their money in that final series. Like, that is a confident feeling in the Connecticut Sun's camp that I've heard from multiple people. And so in my mind, I think if you're the Connecticut Sun, you're looking at this like, this is an opportunity to really establish and show, hey, like, we are a top team, and we can go toe to toe with the Seattle Storm, the number one team. So I'm really excited for this. Let's talk a little bit about like how these teams match up, and kind of, we don't need to get into predictions, but maybe we'll put $1 on the line at the end of the show and decide who we're going with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are we? What is it? Spencer Dinwiddie's $1 if he $1 bonus with his new contract he signed with the Washington Wizards. Is that at stake? Are we going to throw that out there?
I didn't know that was a thing, because I sadly know nothing about any NBA team other than KG is no longer with the Timberwolves.
That is true, unfortunately.
That's the extent of my knowledge. Yeah, we're throwing $1 on this. All right. But like, look, let's be honest about it. An interesting aspect, like, when I look at the Seattle Storm, I would say their greatest strength is having been there and knowing that they have the tools. Like, we can talk about this about many teams, great teams, and because we're both from Minnesota, there's going to be a little bit more Lynx talking about this Commissioner's Cup matchup than would make sense, because the Lynx aren't playing in it. But I always use the Lynx and the Sparks as examples of teams that had all this star power, but knew today is Candace Parker's game. Today's Chelsea Gray's game. Today is Maya Moore's game, Simone Augustus, Sylvia, whoever it was. It was that selfless mindset of, we know we're great. We know who our superstars are, but we also know, any given Sunday, as they say, it might be Jewel Lloyd's day. It might be Brianna Stewart's day. They have that ability. Their weakness on the flip side is when they lost Natasha Howard, they don't have that big physical presence in the post. They have Mercedes Russell, who is a giant among giants. They have Ezzy. They have opportunities and possibilities with players. They don't have that like mean, lean, muscular machine who's going to defend the paint for them. And the only reason that I think they've been able to get away with it and teams haven't so far taken so much advantage of it, and obviously it's an oversimplification, but as the league moves more towards a flex five, stretch five, whatever you want to call it, style of play, not many teams still have that Sylvia Fowles, that Bree Jones, that Liz Cambage, that Brittany Griner, those players who are that major muscle down low. And so I think in my mind, the Connecticut Sun truly are a team when you look at who they have that can, as long as their offense is going, they have the tools defensively to stifle this team, and they also have the tools offensively. If the buckets are dropping, they have the tools to keep up with this team, and really, attack their weaknesses. So I'm not saying I'm going with the Sun for sure. We'll decide that at the end. But kind of talk to me, just like when you look at these two teams on paper, what are your thoughts? What jumps out to you about this game?
I do agree with you that when I say they, I'm referring to the Sun. Their strengths, kind of counterbalance, like you mentioned, Seattle's weaknesses, and it'll be interesting to see how Connecticut is able to kind of take advantage of that. Obviously Seattle is a good team, and they are going to make a deep run in the playoffs once again this year. But they, like you mentioned, they don't have Natasha Howard, and looking back at that team, it's crazy how much talent they had spread across that roster with Howard on the team. But without her, like you said, they do have some weaknesses, and they do have some holes, especially defensively, which Connecticut's going to have to take advantage of, and they're going to have to try and exploit throughout the entirety of this game. And the other aspect of this is, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. The Storm do have a decent amount of players that were taking part in the Olympics. They were, they just did get back from playing overseas in Tokyo, and Connecticut might be a little bit more well rested than what Seattle is, and how will the Sun be able to take advantage of that and kind of hit the ground running, right away at the beginning of this game. That I think will be a big key. But it'll be interesting to see how the game plays out. It's always tough to go against Seattle. I know Connecticut. This isn't knocking Connecticut by any means, and they are a very good team as well. But it's just tough to go against the likes of Brianna Stewart, Suber, Jewel Lloyd, and the type of talent that they have. So I'm really looking forward to the game. It'll be interesting to see, like we talked about, the caliber of play or the quality of play. Or I'm not saying that the players wouldn't put together a quality product, but how serious they take this game, and how important it is to them to kind of make it a more of a serious game rather than a kind of a laid back, just extra game to the year. So
but that's the aspect where I feel like, let's say the Sun, I mean, either team, right?
mm-hmm.
If one team comes in and is like, no, we're taking it's the prisoner dilemma, right? Like, you go into it, you don't know what the other team's going to do, but your choice is either, okay, we like lackadaisically go into this, and maybe the other team is going to be the one that takes it seriously, and you kind of get screwed over by that. Or you go into it, full throttle, and then the other team has to react. Now, obviously, you can use that simile, metaphor, whatever, towards any basketball game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with this, I think it adds a new element, and I just feel like one team is going to come out and kind of punch the other team in the mouth and say, hey, no, we want to win this. And just swagger, momentum, stylistic way, I feel like it has to be the Sun. Like, I just don't think like the Storm are that type of team that like, okay, we hit the court and we're just like they're almost like the Harlem Globetrotters doing like their like crazy layup line, not even a layup line, but you know what I'm talking about when they're like
Mhm.
running those circles or whatever. Like it's just smoothness like that, and it's like mechanical. But there isn't that like no, we're coming out to beat you aspect. I haven't felt that maybe
Mhm.
from Seattle yet.
Well, and the other thing too, I do agree with you that if I had to choose one team to do that, it would be Connecticut. And the other, side of things, or to kind of feed into that, the Sun did lose to Seattle twice this year, and they in both games they lost, by well, the first one was a close game,
3 points, yeah.
but the second one was kind of a blowout. So there might be a little bit of a pride factor, and they want to kind of get back at Seattle. But I think that kind of plays a big factor into it as well, as far as them trying to come out and hit the ground running and kind of make a statement, or kind of make a point in trying to get a statement win.
It's thinking this over at while we're talking about this, I'm like, yeah, man, it kind of sucks that like, a team like the Sparks or the Mystics aren't able to play in the Commissioner's Cup and, get those extra reps because, both teams have players coming off injuries, didn't have the greatest of first halves, looking to make a push in the second half of the season, which by the way, it's more like second or like the last third of the season. Because I think it's like on average, like what, 12 games left, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but obviously that only happens if you win. So like an aspect of the Commissioner's Cup, yeah, you get the opportunity to make more money, right? You get the opportunity to play again, which obviously playing a game as a paid professional athlete equals more money, but also it's the advantage of getting that extra game, those extra reps that I honestly don't think is going to get enough attention. And like, are we going to see maybe, is this a preview of the WNBA finals? It very well could be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially, in it will be interesting for me just in a more, step back, large scale view of this, the impact of this game on the history of the league. When we go, and when we're at the 35th anniversary of the league, and we look back at the 10 years of the Commissioner's Cup, hopefully the Commissioner's Cup continues out because I think it's a cool, fun idea. But how has the Commissioner's Cup impacted that rest of the season, impacted the trajectory of those teams that play in it is going to be a huge aspect of it. I mean, like, let's say we're talking about a situation where in those 10 years, 8 of the 10 years, that was the finals or whoever won the Commissioner's Cup ended up winning the season. Whatever it is, I think that's going to be an interesting aspect that honestly I haven't seen anybody talk about.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I definitely agree with you, and the other thing too that you oftentimes hear coaches talk about, or players talk about, or more often than not, it's coaches and maybe veteran players, is getting another game against a team. Whether it's on tape, just to be able to look back at film, get a better idea of the personnel on the other side of the other side of the court and with the other team. Um, that's a big important thing, and especially when it comes to two playoff teams that, like you said, they could face off in the WNBA finals. That's very important, and I think that specifically for Seattle, I can already see players like Stewart and Bird, just chomping at the bit to get more tape and get more things to study, and more tape to study on Connecticut if they do end up facing them in the postseason. So that's the other aspect of this that I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention to, or really thinking about. Because I do think that that's really important, not only for coaches but for players to get that extra footage, especially in the second half of the year. I know it's at the beginning of the quote unquote second half of the year, But it is coming down to the home stretch, and this is a team that they're, each side. These are the teams that'll probably enter going into the postseason as far as how they're playing and the style of play that they play with.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Before we get to our predictions to close off this episode, I want to remind everyone, do you want to sponsor an episode of the Winsidr Show? Email us at info@winsidr.com, because Winsidr is your one-stop shop for all your WNBA news and conversation. We can't do without your help. Become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Winsidr. For just a few dollars a month, you can help grow the game. All right, Mitchell, it's time. I'll, you know what? As being the guest on the show, I will let you decide. You can pick first or second, so you can decide who you want to pick. Because right, if we're putting $1 on it, we can't pick the same team.
Right? Are we just picking straight up like winner loser, or are
straight up? If you want to put 25 cents on a point, a point, like a score mark, like they're gonna win by 10. They're gonna win by 5. I'll let you do that too.
Okay. Well, we have been kind of talking up Connecticut for majority of this podcast, but I got to go with Seattle. I think the Storm they're just too good, and they're just too well rounded, even with the weaknesses that we had talked about, especially in the post defensively. But I got to go with Seattle. If we do a total point kind of over under, let's go with, man, these two teams like to run up the score. Let's go. Do you want me to okay,
tell me how much they win by, and give me yeah, and if you're within 4 points plus or minus, you get it.
Okay. Let's go Seattle 85, Connecticut 78.
All right, I'm writing it down. Seattle 85, Connecticut 78. Ooh, a 7-point win for Seattle. Okay, I'm glad, because I feel like, no offense to you, Seattle's the cop-out pick. So I'm glad. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a reason, right? All right, so you got that. I'm going Connecticut by, you know what? I'll go Connecticut by 8. 90. No, you know what? It's Connecticut. If they win, it's not going to be high scoring. It's going to be drugged out. So I'm going to go 84. 84 to 78. That's what I'm going to do. 84-78. Right. Not go 8 points. 84-78.
All right. So we basically have the same score, but flipped around.
Yes. All right. Hey, tune in next time to see which one of us is balling out at the dollar store.
$1.25 at stake.
$1.25 at stake. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. And real quick before we sign off, remind everyone where they can see the different locations they can see your writings, but also where they can see your Twitter ramblings.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is m_Hansen13. That's HANSEN. That's how you spell my last name. And then I'm on Winsidr here every other week. I'm also I do some links coverage for zone coverage at zonecoverage.com. And then I also do something new this year with some WNBA sports betting, some kind of covering the league from a sports betting angle for sportsbettingdime.com. So feel free to check it out. And like you mentioned, all my my Twitter ramblings and kind of nonsense that I spew on there, with mixed in reporting and some WNBA stuff. But I like to keep it lighthearted as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining, and I know we'll have you back later on.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.